I want to make sure that we get a couple, I think there are a couple of questions that came in. So here's a question. It's one of the questions from Hanether is, do you differentiate between cultural and racial diversity?
That's the whole question. Okay, yeah. So cultural diversity to me is sort of an umbrella term. And within that is, we can talk about race, gender, sexuality, social class, disability, age, etc. Right? There's a whole, so cultural difference is, to me, is sort of an umbrella term. We can talk about all these things in it. Oftentimes there's coded language, which when we say, when some people are afraid to use the word race because it's such a taboo in our society to even talk about. So they'll say, oh, there's a cultural difference or something, and they really mean a racial difference. Yeah.
No, it's good. That's a great point. It kind of gets back to some of those terms we talked about in the very beginning, where people are going to pick a certain term to use versus another one that might be more potent. Here's a question. Let's see. What is the difference between being a non-racist and being an anti-racist?
Wow, I just wrote a blog on this, that exact question. That's funny. My latest blog literally has that concept in it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so a non-racist is somebody who says it doesn't have to do with me. And it's very similar to what we were talking about earlier. The color blindness is like, I don't deal with race. I don't have anything to do, it doesn't have anything to do with me. It's out of the mouth of a white person who's saying that, because a person of color knows that they're treated differently. They know what their experience is in this society. So it's usually a white person who'll say, I'm a non-racist. I don't, An anti-racist, on the other hand, is somebody who understands what's going on, knows a little bit of the history. You don't have to be a whole expert, but you have to understand that there is a legacy of institutionalized discrimination in our society, and knows that, and then sees what, and asks the question. They're kind of seeing the world through that lens. So they're constantly asking the question, how is this playing out? How do I see this operating in the world? So if I could just give a quick story that might be helpful for folks. So this was when I was first learning about my own white privilege. I was at a grocery store, and I had been studying it in an academic context, and was sort of skeptical because, again, as a white person, I was taught not to see it. I was taught to ignore my own whiteness. And so when I read about it, I was thinking, I get it, but I'm not quite sure. And I'm bisexual, I'm Jewish. So I'm always thinking on the discrimination, when I was growing up, that's what I was thinking about. I wasn't thinking about my whiteness having anything to do with anything. Anyway, long story short, I go into a grocery store, and this stuff is rattling around my head, and a family of color is in front of me, and the clerk behind the register, behind the counter, literally, they're deciding which ice cream they want to be, what ice cream they want. They're, in this ice cream area, and the clerk looks at me and goes like this, like, come on forward. And, I sat there and I'm trying to figure out, why would she do that? There must be extenuating, this is what I'm learning, and I'm thinking there must be extenuating circumstances. Like, why would she have done that? Like, why not take the person who was in front of me in line? Yeah. And, that's when it started, the light bulb started to go on, and I started thinking, this is what white privilege looks like. I mean, it's such a small, it's a subtle example that I'm using, but it is so pervasive. Once you have that anti-racist lens, you start really, it's not you start seeing it or making stuff up. It's that you start noticing what's always been there, what's always been in our culture. And so that's what I think about. By the way, when that happened, I had such a pit in my stomach. I felt sick. I had and that's not uncommon. I've been teaching these notions for a couple of decades now. And what I often get is people say they have a headache. I had a headache and a stomach ache for literally weeks just because recognizing what I just hadn't seen before. And all of a sudden I started going, it is everywhere.
And I think a lot of people have their stomachs in a pit. I know we're at time. Jeff, do we have any other questions that we need to answer, or can we just do that via email if we need to?
I think you got one more. How can you invite open conversations about racism in the workplace without making your coworkers who may not be so open uncomfortable?
Okay, that's a great question. Did you get that question, Dena?
I did. Do you want to respond, or you want me to?
All right, let's hear what you got to say. What you have to say.
Okay.
So
first of all, I have I really think twice about the word comfort. I think comfort is overrated in these conversations. I think that we shouldn't be so worried about making everybody comfortable, because change needs to happen, and oftentimes change can be uncomfortable. And as long as I always talk about the difference between leading edge and bleeding edge, that we want folks to kind of be pushing their boundaries a little bit around this whole issue. Not to the point that they're so uncomfortable that they're having panic attacks. Like, that's not what I'm shooting for, but I am suggesting that we aren't quite as concerned. There's D'Angelo's book, White Fragility. Mm-hmm. This is a great resource for folks who are worried about that issue, that, we're worried about, oh my gosh, we might make some folks uncomfortable. Well, it is what it's going to take. And I think we need to be open to having those conversations and maybe explaining even some of the things that Cody has said already through this, and using those as examples, or perhaps some of the examples I've used, to help people understand why it's so important to have these conversations. Yeah. Yeah,
no, that's great. Well, I really am thankful and grateful to have Dr. Samuels join us today. This has been amazing. You've shared some great information. I know we'll get information out on how people can reach you to get some deeper understanding and consulting in this space. And I want to thank everyone for all the questions that they've presented. And anything that you want to end up on with, Dena?
Just to thank you so much, Cody. I've really enjoyed the conversation. As challenging as it can be, I think it's critically important that we engage anyway. And so thank you. Thank you for making the forum possible. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Maybe we'll get a chance to do a version 2. So we'll see what Jeff has to say about that. All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll let you get back to your day. We'll get the replay out, and I hope you all have a great day.
Thanks.
Take care.